Power is often imagined as command, a raised voice, a signature that moves things, a name on a door seen by many. We picture it under lights, at podiums, in photographs, where authority looks confident and complete. But power rarely feels that way from inside. It arrives quietly. It settles into long hours, into rooms where applause never reaches. Often it begins after the doors close, when the corridor empties, when the last file remains on the desk, and the chair feels heavier than before. There is a moment when power stops being visible, when it becomes weight, not the weight of status, but the weight of consequence. A decision does not announce itself. It waits. In margins, in notes, in half-read pages. It waits for someone to carry it forward. Authority, in these moments, is not loud. It is careful. It listens to silence. It measures what cannot be undone. There is an old thought that power is sweetest when shared, and heaviest when held alone. In public office, the second truth is more familiar. Someone once observed that responsibility is the price of power, not spoken as warning, but as an acceptance of reality. Because power is not only the right to act, it is the inability to escape acting, to know that choosing nothing is also a choice. A late evening office tells this story well. A desk lamp, a cooling cup of tea, files stacked like unanswered questions. Each file carries people who will never enter the room. Farmers, students, families, strangers. Their names reduced to paper, their futures waiting in ink. In such moments, authority feels intimate, not grand, not heroic, just quietly unavoidable. There are no slogans here, only balance between urgency and caution, between fairness and feasibility. Power does not shout in these hours. It breathes, slowly, as if aware that haste can harm. The absence of cameras changes everything. Without applause, motives become clearer. Without noise, conscience speaks more plainly. It is here that authority reveals its true shape, not as dominance, but as stewardship, something held, not owned. Public office was never meant to be personal possession. It was imagined as a trust, borrowed from the many, to be returned unchanged in spirit. This idea lingers in the room, in the careful handling of paper. In the hesitation before a signature, in the awareness of tomorrow. Power, then, is not about control. It is about care. Care for outcomes unseen, and for people never met. The burden is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It simply stays. Asking to be carried honestly. Authority teaches patience in this way. It slows the hand. It deepens the pause. It makes certainty feel earned. Even the chair seems to know this. Worn at the edges, familiar with waiting, holding those who sit longer than planned. Files do not argue. But they remember. Every mark stays. Every omission too. This is why power feels different in silence. Because silence does not flatter. It only reflects. In these hours, decisions stop being abstract. They acquire faces. Consequences gain time. And responsibility finds weight. Power, stripped of display, becomes inward. A conversation with restraint. A negotiation with impact. There is no celebration at the end of such evenings. Only closure. Sometimes relief. Sometimes doubt. Yet the work continues. Quietly. File after file. Night after night. Perhaps this is where authority truly lives. Not in recognition, but in resolve. Not in being seen, but in being answerable. And as the light is turned off, the room holds the decision, unapplauded, unshared. For a moment, it is enough to sit with that. Power is often understood as the capacity to make things happen, to order, to allocate, to decide. It is the ability to act, to move machinery, to alter outcomes. Authority is quieter. It is not about capacity, but permission. Not about force, but acceptance. It answers a different question: who gets to act and why? In a constitutional democracy, this distinction matters deeply, because power without authority can act fast, but it cannot justify itself for long. The Indian Constitution was written with this awareness. It does not deny power. It disciplines it. It asks power to borrow legitimacy before it moves. That legitimacy does not come from personality or position alone. It comes from alignment with the Constitution, from acting within a framework agreed upon in advance. This is why the Constitution is supreme, not any office or individual. Every authority, however high, flows downward from that text, never upward from personal will. Power may exist in offices, armies, budgets, and institutions, but authority exists only when power submits itself to rules, when it accepts limits, even when it could ignore them. The rule of law rests on this idea, that the same law binds ruler and ruled, that discretion has borders, that equality before law is not symbolic. Article 14 is often read as a promise of equality, but it is also a restraint on authority. It tells power that arbitrariness breaks legitimacy. Authority weakens the moment reasons are replaced by impulses. The moment procedure is seen as an obstacle rather than protection. The moment fairness is treated as delay. Separation of powers reflects similar caution. By not distrust of institutions, but distrust of unchecked concentration. The legislature makes law. The executive implements. The judiciary reviews, not to slow governance, but to steady it. Power wants speed. Authority demands balance. The Constitution sides with balance, even at the cost of haste. A political thinker once observed that power becomes authority only when people believe it is rightful. Force may compel obedience, but legitimacy earns acceptance. This idea echoes Max Weber's distinction between sheer domination and legitimate authority. One relies on coercion, the other on belief in the system itself. India's constitutional design reflects this insight. It assumes that intentions can be good and still be dangerous, that outcomes alone cannot justify methods. History offers enough reminders. Emergency-era decisions followed legal form, but strained constitutional spirit. Power acted, but authority faltered. The lesson was not about paralysis. It was about humility, that even elected power must remain answerable. Procedures exist for this reason, not to frustrate governance, but to protect legitimacy when pressure mounts. A file moving slowly can feel inefficient, but it also records reasons. It leaves traceability. It creates memory. Authority survives scrutiny because it expects it. Power resents scrutiny because it fears delay. The Constitution places its trust in the former. This is why even well-meaning shortcuts feel unsettling, because authority is not about intention alone. It is about method, fairness, and consistency. Dr. Ambedkar once warned that, however good a constitution may be, it depends on those who operate it. Authority lives in that responsibility. Power can be exercised once. Authority must be sustained over time, through predictability, through restraint. In public office, this difference becomes personal. An official may have power to act immediately, but authority asks whether acting now is rightful. This inner pause is constitutional in spirit. It reflects fidelity to a system larger than self, to rules that outlast individuals. Authority is therefore slower than power, but it is also sturdier. It survives transitions. It endures disagreement. Power dazzles in moments. Authority steadies across years. The Constitution chose the second deliberately. Understanding this difference is not about exams. It is about seeing governance as trust, not command, as service bounded by law. And in that understanding, the burden of decision-making becomes clearer. Power may act. Authority must justify. Rules give governance its structure. They define boundaries. They describe processes. But they do not describe every moment that arrives at an office door. Between what is written and what unfolds, there is a gap. It is in this gap that decision-making truly begins. Governance is often imagined as rule-following, as if files move on rails laid down in advance. In reality, rules are maps, not roads. Every administrator eventually encounters a situation where the map ends, where the terrain changes, where judgment must step in. This is not a failure of law. It is an acknowledgement of life. No constitution can predict every flood, every conflict, every sudden scarcity. The executive power of the state reflects this reality. Articles like 73 and 162 speak broadly. They allow action in spaces where detail is impossible. This breadth is intentional. It trusts human judgment within legal limits. It assumes responsibility will fill the silence of text. Discretion, then, is not freedom without restraint. It is responsibility without instruction, a heavier condition than it appears. Consider a district officer during a sudden crisis. A bridge collapses after heavy rain. Communication is broken. Lives may be at risk. The rulebook offers procedures, but it cannot rank human urgency. It cannot tell which delay is acceptable, which shortcut is dangerous. Decisions must be taken with partial information. Rumors travel faster than facts. Time presses harder than clarity. Every option carries risk. Acting fast may save lives and break protocol. Waiting may preserve procedure and cost time. This is where judgment replaces certainty, not to escape rules, but to serve their underlying purpose. Fairness and due process still matter here. Even urgency does not erase dignity. Even speed must remember reason. Another moment of discretion appears in policy choices. When resources are limited. When helping one group, delays help to another. Budgets are not moral texts. They are compromises written in numbers. Every allocation reflects a decision not taken elsewhere. No policy arrives with perfect outcomes, only trade-offs, only probabilities, only unintended consequences waiting quietly. An administrator rarely chooses between right and wrong. More often, between incomplete goods, between outcomes that are all imperfect. A philosopher once wrote that judgment is the courage to act when rules fall silent. Not bravado, but acceptance of responsibility. This silence can be uncomfortable. Files do not protest, but consequences do. They emerge later, sometimes years later. Decision-making under uncertainty is lonely. Consultation helps, but cannot remove ownership. Signatures still belong to one hand. This is why empathy matters. Not admiration, not suspicion, just understanding of complexity. Mistakes are possible even with sincerity. Good intentions do not guarantee good result. But inaction also leaves a trace. Governance rarely offers clear endings, only sequences of choices, each narrowing the next. Due process exists to slow impulse. Discretion exists to prevent paralysis. Both are needed. Neither is sufficient alone. A fair decision is not always popular. A popular decision is not always fair. Administrators learn to live with this tension. Public judgment often arrives without context. Files are read backward. Outcomes are seen without the pressure of the moment. Yet the system depends on individuals, willing to decide without full comfort, to act knowing hindsight will be sharper. This is not heroism. It is routine governance. Ordinary people handling extraordinary uncertainty. Understanding this does not excuse error. It explains weight, the quiet burden that accompanies authority. When rules end, judgment begins, and with it, responsibility that cannot be delegated. Every decision has a life beyond the moment it is taken. After the file is closed, after the order is issued, its echo continues. Governance does not end at action. It begins a quieter phase afterward, one where choices are revisited, sometimes years later. This is the afterlife of decisions, where intent meets inspection, where context fades, but records remain. Audits arrive without urgency. Courts examine without memory of pressure. Questions are asked in calm rooms, far from the moment of crisis. Accountability is woven into the system by design, not as suspicion, but as balance. Power must be answerable to something larger. Financial decisions invite scrutiny from independent eyes. Legislative oversight revisits executive choices. Judicial review asks whether power stayed within law. Public opinion adds another layer. It is immediate, emotional, and unforgiving. It rarely sees files, only outcomes. Together, these mechanisms protect democracy. They ensure authority does not drift. They remind institutions that trust must be earned daily. Yet, for the individual decision-maker, this architecture can feel heavy, not abstract, very personal. A signature is not just ink. It is a future question mark. It carries the possibility of being summoned back long after memory fades. Article 311 reflects an awareness of this burden. It recognizes that civil servants need procedural protection, not to shield wrongdoing, but to prevent fear from paralyzing duty. The Constitution seems to understand human psychology. It knows that unchecked fear can distort judgment as much as unchecked power. A thinker once observed that responsibility does not end with action. It begins there. Time is the final judge. Consider a district officer facing a sensitive approval. The project is lawful. The need is real. But scrutiny will be intense. Questions may arise later. Why this contractor? Why this timing? Why this interpretation? The easiest response is delay. Another note. Another clarification. Another committee. No rule demands speed, but the public need does not pause. Delay becomes a silent decision, one rarely audited. Fear here is not cowardice, it is anticipation. An awareness of how actions travel forward in time. Many decisions are shaped not by law, but by imagined future hearings, by how a choice might look when stripped of urgency. This anticipation can make governance cautious, sometimes wisely, sometimes excessively. The difference is hard to define in advance. Accountability asks for reasons, but reasons are often rooted in context, and context is fragile. It does not age well. Files preserve logic, but not atmosphere. They do not record tension or the silence before deciding. Courts seek fairness, not convenience. Audits seek compliance, not compassion. Both are necessary. Neither captures the full moment. This is why accountability feels asymmetrical. The decision is made in pressure. It is judged in calm. Yet, without this system, authority would slowly detach from responsibility. Power would forget restraint. The cost would be collective. The burden, then, is not accidental. It is the price of trust, of being allowed to decide on behalf of others. For administrators, this weight is internalized early. It shows up as caution, as documentation, as hesitation that outsiders may misread. Not every delay is inefficiency. Sometimes it is self-protection. Sometimes it is respect for consequence. The system does not demand fear, but it does create awareness that every act leaves a trail. Living with this awareness changes decision-making. It slows confidence. It deepens doubt. It sharpens responsibility. Accountability is essential, but it is also humanly demanding. It asks individuals to carry tomorrow, while acting today. In this tension, governance continues. Not smoothly, not perfectly, but deliberately. The invisible burdens remain unseen, yet they shape every signature. Every choice made quietly. Power in governance is often mistaken for command. For civil servants, it arrives differently, not as ownership, but as something held briefly on behalf of others. The Constitution imagines this role with restraint. It does not describe rulers. It speaks of service shaped by justice, liberty, and equality. These words are not ornamental. They quietly define limits. They remind authority whom it serves, and why it exists at all. A civil servant inherits power not as reward, but as responsibility carried across time. It belongs to the office, never to the individual. This is why permanence matters. Governments change, policies shift, institutions endure. Continuity is not resistance to change. It is memory, a record of what has been tried and what has failed before. Political neutrality grows from this permanence, not indifference, but distance. A refusal to merge office with ideology. Authority gains credibility when it does not lean. When decisions survive transitions. When files remain consistent, even as headlines change. One statesman once remarked that civil services are the steel frame of democracy. Invisible, but load-bearing. Quiet, but essential. The metaphor matters. A frame does not decide direction. It ensures stability. It holds weight without seeking attention. Trusteeship captures this relationship well. Power is entrusted, not owned. To be used, not displayed. To be returned intact. Consider a simple service delivery moment. A pension approval. A land record correction. A grievance resolved quietly. Authority here is intimate. It touches daily life. It shapes dignity. It affects trust in the state itself. The citizen does not experience governance as theory. It arrives as a cue, a form, a decision that either listens or ignores. In such moments, power is exercised downward, but authority must look upward, toward constitutional values. toward fairness beyond convenience. Neutrality protects this balance. It prevents power from becoming partisan. It allows the same rules to apply across changing regimes. Commitment is therefore not to a government, but to the Constitution itself, to its spirit, even when text leaves room for interpretation. This commitment is tested quietly in transfers, in pressures, in moments when expediency beckons. Institutional memory offers guidance here. It recalls precedents. It remembers consequences. It tempers enthusiasm with experience. Power exercised without memory repeats mistakes. Authority grounded in memory avoids them, slowly, often unnoticed. Trusteeship also implies restraint. The awareness that not every power needs use, that sometimes refusal preserves legitimacy. Silence can be an ethical act. So can delay. So can insisting on process, when shortcuts appear tempting. The civil servant's role is therefore paradoxical. To act decisively, yet remain invisible. To influence without imprinting ego. Respect for this role grows over time, not through praise, but through predictability, through fairness repeated quietly. Citizens may not remember names, but they remember treatment. Whether authority felt humane or arbitrary, this is where power returns to service, not as sacrifice, not as virtue, but as function. Governance becomes credible when authority feels borrowed, when power seems careful, aware of its temporary nature. In this understanding, the civil servant is neither ruler nor hero, only a custodian of trust, holding the system steady for those unseen. When the file is closed, nothing truly ends. The room quiets. The table clears. The signature settles into paper. Dates are fixed. References added. Movement begins elsewhere. Decisions travel outward. Into offices never visited. Into homes never seen. Into days not yet lived. The officer moves on. A new charge. Another desk, another view. But the decision stays behind. It learns to live without its maker. It ends systems. It becomes routine. For some, it becomes relief. For others, delay. For many, something barely noticed, yet quietly shaping their lives. Governance rarely announces its presence. It is felt gradually, in access granted or denied, in paths opened or narrowed. Time becomes the true interpreter, not intention, not explanation, just consequence unfolding slowly. A philosopher once wrote that we live forward, but understand backward. Decisions wait for understanding. Years later, a policy shows its edges. A rule reveals its exclusions. An order finds its unintended reach. Those who signed may no longer be there, but institutions remain. Registers remember. Procedures persist. This is constitutional continuity at work. The idea that offices endure beyond occupants, that authority does not retire. It is inherited. Each decision joins a long conversation with past judgments, with existing practices, with future revisions not yet imagined. No decision stands alone. It leans on precedent. It becomes precedent. It invites response. The weight of this is rarely dramatic. It is steady. It sits quietly across decades, waiting to be felt. Files age differently than people. Paper yellows. Ink fades. But effect remains. A welfare rule reshapes eligibility. A land order redraws boundaries. A disciplinary action echoes in service culture. Lives adapt around these choices, often without knowing their origin, often without names, only with results. Governance thus becomes layered time. Past decisions shaping present realities. Present actions shaping future constraints. Those within the system sense this continuity, even when they do not name it. It appears as caution, as respect for record, not reverence, just awareness. That today's clarity may become tomorrow's question. Silence returns after the file is closed, but it is not empty. It holds waiting. It holds unfolding. The desk lamp is turned off. Another office lights up elsewhere. The system does not sleep. It shifts. Responsibility does not conclude. It diffuses across institutions, across time. Some decisions age well. They integrate smoothly. They become invisible supports. Others resist time. They are challenged, reviewed, sometimes undone. Both outcomes are part of governance. Neither final, neither absolute. Just movement. The Constitution anticipated this rhythm. It spoke of endurance, of amendment, of continuity without stagnation. Authority here is not a final word. It is a contribution, a voice added to many others. One statesman once noted that the true test of power is what remains after the holder is gone. What remains is rarely certainty, more often influence, subtle, distributed, woven into routine. Governance continues as dialogue between earlier choices and later corrections, between memory and revision. The present listens to the past. The future will listen to both. No moment speaks alone. As the file rests on the shelf, it joins countless others, each carrying a fragment of the state's long conversation. For now, there is nothing to add, only time and the quiet work of continuity.